This should be a fun class. I've been really excited about this all month. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to get to taste all the different flavors of food that are out there, really. I mean, I'm sure if we had more refined perceptions than we do, we probably could taste a lot of different tastes than we even do. But we're at least going to cover the main ones tonight. So basically, I was just going to give a little bit of introduction, just to mention that basically, I'm an acupuncturist. I work with Chinese herbal medicine and acupuncture are my primary modes of treatment, also nutrition. And basically, the way herbs work, it's not kind of a mysterious thing that, oh, you know, we just heard this herb does this thing, and so that's why we use it. It's actually very specific. Just like foods, herbs and foods both have very specific qualities. They have temperatures, they have flavors, and that's the one we're focusing on tonight. They have directions or movements in the body. They have organs they're affiliated with and that they affect. And so because of those things, that's why they can do what they do. I like to dispel the mystery in that sense, that it's not just some made-up thing. So it is very specific. So basically, in terms of using foods or herbs as medicine, the main things we want to take into consideration are a person's constitution. So that's a big topic, and of course we don't have enough time to talk about that tonight. But that's a very important piece. So what I'm going to be presenting today about the tastes and flavors of foods, you may be able to think about what that means for you yourself, and kind of as you're eating or maybe choosing herbs for certain things, then you can make that distinction. But otherwise, if it's really specific or for a specific health concern, of course, I would just recommend meeting with a practitioner for that. So health condition, then other things we want to consider are the season, time of year. Typically, it's a good rule of thumb that whatever foods in season is probably a good choice. So want to keep that in mind. Also, age, certain things we want to eat or be more careful of as we get older. So that's the main thing. And so I thought to go over quickly before we get into the taste, just cover those basic things I mentioned about the categories of foods and herbs, so that you have a sense of what that means. So I'm going to write these out real quick so you have this. So basically, I mentioned thermal property. So this one basically refers to its temperature. And generally speaking, we divide things into temperature of cold, cool, neutral, warm, and then hot. So basically, it's kind of common sense, but if something's cold, it's going to treat something that's really hot. And if something's cool, it's going to treat something that's a little bit hot. If it's neutral, it's not going to have a huge effect either way. So sometimes that's good to know too, because if you don't want to be pushing someone in a certain direction either way, then you might want to stay away from really hot or really cold, extremes in that. So that's about all I wanted to say. Just mention that. Does that make sense? Thermal property. The next one is direction or movement. Direction or movement. So this talks about, basically, is it moving? Does it have a tendency to move things up in the body, move things down? Those are the biggest, but then we also have things that just generally course the energy. So they're just moving in general, stimulating. So this becomes pretty clear in terms of health conditions. So say we have something like a cough or vomiting. These in Chinese medicine are said to be conditions that are rebellious. So that's where the qi is supposed to be going down, and it's actually going up. So we want to redirect it back down, and certain herbs and foods do that. So that's an example of direction and movement. And then likewise, there's the opposite. So certain things like diarrhea is going down, or prolapse of an organ. Then we don't say rebellious. We don't use that word with that. But anyway, we want to lift the qi. So there's herbs and foods that do that. Another nice thing you can think about in terms of direction and movement, a lot of times, particularly with herbs and also foods, when you think of the plant and how it is in the ground. Typically, like the actual roots into the bark, the main body of the plant, then the branches and the leaves, and then the flowers and the fruits. These have similar effects on our body. So like, for instance, the flowers and the fruits typically have a more light, they definitely are more light, or sometimes aromatic, they call that, and that's a flavor that's talked about in Chinese medicine. But they'll often have more of an effect on like the upper chakras, the head, even sometimes more just the consciousness, the mind. So fruits and flowers are like that, whereas the roots are going to be more grounding. So when we talk about have your root vegetables in the wintertime, we're trying to really settle and keep things in and deep. So that's why. So that's kind of part of the movement and direction. And then with that too, there's some herbs that it's just they're empirical, so we use them empirically to guide a formula to a certain part of the body. So certain herbs can be used to treat the lungs. We say it just very definitely enters the lung, so we use that herb. Or this herb takes things to the lower limbs, if we want to affect the knees, for instance. So again, that's all with that direction and movement. Kind of similarly to that last point I was just making is the channel and the organ. So again, choosing things because we've found that they affect certain organs of the body. So pretty straightforward. There's an herb called Penelia. It's a Chinese herb that's really good for relieving nausea and vomiting. So because of that, we know it enters the stomach channel. So we can know that about it. So then other things that might be affecting the stomach channel, we could use that herb possibly, or at least consider that herb, taking into account all the other things it does. So you may not only just use it because it enters the stomach channel. You definitely need to know what other qualities it has too. But
How do you spell it?
Penelia? Yeah, this is a Chinese herb. This is the Latin name. Penelia. So then the fourth one is this is definitely a big one, the action, or the effect, sometimes they'll say. The action or effect of the herb or food. So typically, there's only 4 major categories within this, 4 major actions or effects. I mean, there's really more, but, and that is to dispel something, to astringe something, to purge, or to tonify or strengthen. So those are real general categories. I can write those down if you'd like, or just repeat them. I'll just repeat. Yeah, to dispel. 4. Yeah, dispel, astringe, purge, or tonify. So basically when we're dispelling things, anytime there's what's called a stagnation or an accumulation in the body, we want to dispel that. These are herbs that are really moving in general. Then astringing is kind of the opposite of that. That's when things are leaking or we're losing fluids or something and we want to pull back and hold it in. So these are herbs that consolidate or restrain. So they'll have words like that around them. An example of that is the herb astragalus. I didn't give you an example. That first one, dispelling, is cinnamon. That's very moving.
Like cleansing, purifying?
The dispelling one, yeah, cinnamon. So then purging, that's when we really want to eliminate something totally from the body. Expel it out, like if we have parasites or worms, something totally inappropriate in the body and we want to get it out. Magnolia bark actually has one herb that's used fairly commonly, or for poisons, anything like that. We want to just purge them out. And then tonifying, that's like I mentioned, strengthening. That's nourishing, building the body, strengthening, enhancing, anything that's like protecting, all of those things. So an example of that is angelica. There's so many, there's many, many herbs in all these categories. So those are the action or the effect. I think this is then the last category. Then the last one is the flavor or the taste.
Can you give an example for tonify?
Angelica.
And cinnamon was for stagnation?
Yeah, for the
Dispel.
first one, dispelling.
Okay.
So for
Another tonifying herb is like ginseng.
This for which one?
Another tonifying, ginseng is a tonifying herb.
Okay.
If you're allergic to cinnamon, what else can you do?
Well, I mean, these are just examples because I don't know if you're talking about something specific.
No, you
but
said take cinnamon and stagnation.
yeah, bupleurum is another common herb that's used in Chinese medicine for stagnation. Bupleurum.
How do you spell that?
That's
EU?
yeah, B-U-P-L-U-E-R-U-M. Bupleurum.
Okay, thanks.
So with flavor and taste, this is something that, this is actually the little, I read this little paragraph in an Ayurvedic text about a month ago, and that's what inspired me to want to teach this class. I was like, wow, this is so interesting how they describe how plants and foods get their flavors. I'd never heard anything like this, so I'm just going to read it to you. It's really sweet. So according to Ayurvedic philosophy, the moon is the mother of water, and the sun is the father of water. Water in the atmosphere, in its pure form, is cold, light, clear, and without taste. The sun causes evaporation of the water from the ocean, causing clouds to form that are carried by the wind to the mountains, where they create precipitation. At the moment water is formed in a cloud, it still has no taste. It is the electrochemical reactions that occur during the creation of thunder and lightning that accompany cloud formation and rain that causes each molecule of water to attract molecules of the 5 elements. The 6 tastes are formed from the various permutations of these elements in combination with the water. This water then eventually falls to the ground, interacts with the plants and other elements in the environment, enters the plants, and this creates the various tastes in the plants. Isn't that fascinating? I don't know, I just really like it, you know. I'm sure on some level, I mean, it makes sense to me. So, you know, yeah.
Where was that from?
That's from, it's a textbook. It's Ayurvedic, Fundamentals of Ayurveda. It's by Dr. Vasant Lad. So I can, actually, well, no, I didn't bring it with me. But
Really interested in the correlations between Ayurveda and Chinese
very
medicine.
much so, yeah.
And there's like contradictions, so it comes down to like knowing what a person needs for their own constitution. It can be different today than what it is tomorrow.
Yeah. I mean, my primary field is Chinese medicine.
Yeah.
I wish that I had time to go to school now for Ayurvedic medicine too. But so far, although, I mean, like I'm going to present the 5 elements here in a minute, and they have different elements in the systems. They read the pulse differently, but a lot of it is similar. I mean, it's not entirely different, the pulse reading. And even the herbs, it's interesting. I mean, I haven't studied enough, like I said, to say, but it seems like they use them in a similar enough way that I don't see it as contradictory, really.
There's just a few things I've noticed when I study. Like fermentation, like Chinese medicine says a lot of fermentation. I think Ayurveda says
There's no fermentation. Yeah, I've read that too.
Can you write that on the board? Ayurvedic medicine?
Sure. Yeah. I can go ahead and erase these things. Yeah, so I was going to start writing some other things too.
What's the
So
example
that's-
for astringent?
Astragalus.
Astragalus. Yeah. Just trying to get it nice and dry so it'll show up. Okay, so basically I'm going to talk quickly for a little bit about the 5 elements according to both TCM and Ayurvedic medicine. So I'll write those up here.
Did you say 6 elements maybe in the example for Ayurveda?
No, there's 5 elements in both.
Okay.
Yeah, but there's 6 tastes
Oh, 6 tastes.
and 5 tastes in Chinese medicine. So we'll get to that.
There might be 2 in fire then.
What's that?
Is it 2 different tastes in fire element? Instead of just one?
No, we'll get to it.
So you were right.
Yeah. So I'm just abbreviating here TCM. That stands for Traditional Chinese Medicine. So actually, maybe I'm going to go ahead and hand out. Do I want to hand this out now? Yes, let's hand this out now. Yeah, I'll just give this side a couple here. Thanks.
So you check pulses and tongues then as well? Like
In
both?
Chinese medicine, yeah. Oh, definitely. That's a huge piece. Those are the two pillars of diagnosis. So we always do that.
How do you feel about kinesiology and muscle testing? Because I don't know what it is with that. I mean, I don't know
Sorry.
what people's pulse. Like, you have to be really trained in that, you know.
Yeah.
I just find like for me like the results are almost like 100%. You know when I find them.
Yeah, it depends. I think it's too big of a topic to go into right now. I have a lot to cover, so yeah, we can, for anything not related to the class directly, we can talk maybe at the end. Thank you. Okay, so looking at the 5 elements, let's just start with Ayurvedic system. So again, like I said, they both have 5 elements, but these, in Ayurveda, they say space, air, fire, water, and earth. So, I mean, I think on this chart it says ether. So it's nice. This gives you kind of like the general qualities. But generally, space is all pervasive,
Space,
everywhere. And air is gaseous, active, mobile, dry. It's the energy that's essential for all of life. So that's air and space. Fire is radiant. It governs digestion, and absorption and assimilation. And we can think of the sun. I mean, this is the central source of heat for everything. Fire is also in charge of, like, that's what changes the processing of the life cycle, you know, from growth to flowering and ripening and flowering and decay. Fire has a lot to do with that process.
Did you say digestion also?
Yeah, digestion. I mean, also you can kind of look at this, I mean, you definitely can look at this in terms of a gradation from most subtle to most gross. So we can think about the most insubstantial to the most substantial. And also you could really look at this in terms of the body's chakras. So kind of space is typically like even above the head and entering into the head, forehead. And then air is kind of as we go down into the throat chakra, kind of this whole speech center. And then fire is definitely into the heart. And then water is mainly like kidney and bladder. And earth and water are pretty close together here in the lower part of the body. So in terms of the organs. So let's see, so then just to say a few things, water is liquid, obviously, life-sustaining, it's a cool element, it nourishes and sustains the environment. And then when we get to earth, that's the most solid, dense element. It's the firm ground of all life. It's what cradles and holds all living creatures, giving food and shelter. So that's Ayurveda. I mean, there's so much we could say about all this, but I'm going to keep going. So then in TCM, the way they have it, the way they talk about it is, let's do it in the same order. Let's see.
TCM stands for?
Traditional
Okay.
Chinese. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah. So in Chinese medicine.
This is also like in ascending order.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm putting the ones that, like, metal kind of correlates as best as it can to space in this system, and then with wood correlates with air, and then otherwise they're the same. So this is something, I mean, I wish I could, you know, maybe I will get the opportunity to study this more and ask doctors in both fields why is it that, you know, that in Chinese medicine we talk about metal and wood and we don't say space and air.
This clarifies so much for me, the fact that you're doing it like in ascending order, aligned with the chakras. I was always confused about the metal, wood, and earth.
Yeah.
I'm like, they're all pretty dense. Like, how is it relate to the chakras. Like I didn't know. Like now, I'm really like.
Yeah.
I can see the difference between the woods, basically.
So, I mean, basically, in terms of the theory overall, like I think that in Chinese medicine, it seems like they're really, with the elements anyway, they're keeping it more earthy rather than including this more spacious aspect. And I think part of that has to do with just like really looking at the body and how are the organs working, how are they functioning, also the constitutional types, which each element can be a constitutional type. You could be a wood person or a water person or a dual type. So I think that they maybe found it more useful to use at least these words even. There's metal types which are really disciplined and structured, and so that metal can give you a sense of that. And another thing that's good to know is that although we use the word element, I often like to just remind people that sometimes they translate it differently. Sometimes they translate this word as phases or changes, the 5 phases or 5 changes, to remind you that it's not fixed. Particularly in English, the word element often has this fixed notion about it. But these are totally dynamic, constantly changing, and totally interrelated as well with each other. Let's see. So, all of us have all of the elements within us. We have different, like I mentioned, constitutions. So some people have maybe more than others, but it's constantly changing. And as the seasons are changing, different elements come up. I could say probably for everybody, certain ones come up. Like in the summertime, fire element is more apparent. But someone who's already a fire constitutional person in the summer will be really fiery. They tend to be really outgoing, really passionate, excited, easy to laugh, very expressive, all those things. So those are qualities of fire element anyway. But then in the summer, it's easier for those things to kind of come out. So, was there a question? No? Okay. I think I just saw the movement. Let's see.
So then, though, in the summer, that fire person might also have more excess heat problems, too. Right?
Yeah, a lot of times fire constitution, they do have, they tend towards heat more than other people might. And so then the summer can aggravate that, definitely. All right, so I think that's good for the elements for now. Oh, I didn't hand you out this one. This is the, just a picture if you want to have of the 5 elements according to Chinese medicine. So you have that first chart, which is the Ayurvedic system. And then this is the Chinese system. So, let's move. It's okay if I erase this? We're going to move on to the tastes and introducing those.
I talked too soon. Isn't it neat? So this is what I have to work on now?
All right. So, I guess I could have left this up here. According to Ayurvedic medicine, there are 6 tastes. So I'm going to list those out. Sweet. This is Ayurveda, yeah. Sweet, sour, salty, bitter, pungent, and astringent. So sweet, I'll read it out loud because this is drawing. So sweet, sour, salty, bitter, pungent, and astringent.
This is Ayurvedic.
This is Ayurvedic, yep.
Sweet sour is 1.
So it's 2 different ones. Sweet, sour, salty, bitter, pungent, and astringent. Yeah, so 6 total in Ayurveda. So these are the 6 tastes we're going to taste tonight. And we just went over those basic elements, and I'm just going to put this up here just in case it's interesting for you. But basically, they, as we mentioned earlier about how tastes are formed, then as a combination of the elements. So the sweet flavor is a combination of earth element, and water. The sour taste is a combination of earth and fire. The salty taste is a combination of water and fire. Bitter taste is a combination of air and space. Pungent is a combination of air and fire. And astringent is air and earth. So if you think about it, the fire and the air elements are light. Fire and air are lighter, so they tend to move upward more easily. So hence the tastes that contain fire and air also move upward in the body and heat the upper part of the body, producing lightness. And then on the other side of things, earth and water are heavier, so they move downward. So this, for instance, the sweet taste, which is a combination of both earth and water, definitely has a downward movement, and it's cooling. And if you have too much of it, it can produce heaviness in the body. So I think we've all experienced eating too much sweet, maybe feeling a little bit heavy. So that's the 6 flavors and their elements. Does that all make sense for now? All right. So let's present the. I'm just going to write the Should we go into them now? Maybe it's good. I could at least just write them up there. Yeah, so I'm going to erase the elements, and then we'll write the TCM tastes, and just so you can see how those are different.
Also 6?
No, so that's an interesting thing. There's only 5.
I thought there's only 5.
Yeah. Okay, so in TCM, we have sweet as well, and we have sour, and salty, and bitter, and then they usually say acrid, but this is really the same as pungent. And then they leave out the last one, astringent. Mainly, I think the reason that is because they see a lot of the astringent qualities can be found in the sour taste. But it's a good thing the difference that Ayurveda makes that TCM doesn't make in the astringency category is that astringency tends to have a cooling and drying effect on the body, whereas sour typically has a more heating and moistening effect. So of course there's exceptions to those things, but generally speaking.
Heating and what?
Moistening.
Say it again?
So sour was heating and
Moistening. Okay, so basically I think how we're going to do it is we'll focus on the Ayurvedic taste, because there's 6 in them instead of 5. And then, I did want to just mention that in Chinese medicine too, they do sometimes say aromatic is another one. It's like kind of another category, although it's not really a flavor so much as like more of a just general quality. What's that?
in the TCM?
In TCM, yeah, aromatic. It's not an official one, but sometimes, particularly in herbal medicine, like certain, like rose petals, for instance, are very aromatic. Or something that has a really strong fragrance, and that really leads to why it does what it does. It's that aromatic
So
aromatic quality.
That can be found in any of the 5 elements?
Yeah, it can combine with, aromatic can combine with a lot of other
Kind of like essential
tastes.
oils, like patchouli oil and ylang-ylang oil or something, right?
Yeah.
They're both pretty like aromatic.
Yeah, but then one's really sweet and one's kind of got a little bit of a bitterness to it almost. The patchouli
So
has
there's
a little.
smells too, and there's the 5 smells too, like
Yeah.
there's 5 tastes pretty much.
Yeah. And colors and everything. I mean, there's so many
Anything
categories.
we can possibly think of.
Yeah, can fall into all of these things. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So let's look at a picture of the tongue. We'll pass that around.
Does the tongue diagnosis cost more than the
And the pulse?
No?
Yeah.
No?
No, it's all included. So I gave you both how it's mapped out here. So basically, I'll just say as you're passing that around, the tongue is seen to be a map of the body. So as I mentioned before, it's one of the diagnostic methods. We look at the tongue and we can see different things. I mean, we're really looking for a lot of different things. The general color of the tongue, the shape of the tongue, how is it fitting in the mouth? Is it still? Is it trembling? Is it really long? Is it really short? I mean, really a lot of different characteristics of the tongue play into what it means about your health. But then in terms of this, what you're looking at now, is the map. So this is where we can hone in on, particularly like if we see a certain color that's only on one part of the tongue, or a certain coating, or what are called macules or papules, little red spots that pop up. If we see those in a certain area, we can ask questions then. Oh, very common one. If I see on the very tip of the tongue, really red tip of the tongue, just the very tip, which is a common thing. If someone hasn't mentioned it already and I see their tongue, how have you been sleeping? Because it relates to the heart, and really in both systems that's true. And really like 95% of the time they say, oh, actually not that great, So it's one of the biggest, just first things that just jumps out a lot on the tongue.
But it seems like
So, yeah, you'll obviously notice when you're looking at these that there are some discrepancies, there's some differences. And again, I don't find that this is truly a contradiction clinically. The main thing is that the heart is at the tip. In both systems you'll see that. Ayurvedic system puts the lungs on the sides of the front of the tongue, whereas in Chinese medicine they put it sort of more to the, in the middle there. But it does kind of cross over into the sides too. And I think that what I found is really true is that the heart is really just that very tip, and that the next section is really more the lungs. So it kind of does correspond there. Then in Chinese medicine, they put the liver and gallbladder on both sides of the tongue. Whereas in Ayurvedic medicine, they do make this distinction between the liver being on one side and the spleen being on the other. And again, I don't think it's super, a lot of times if you see something on the sides of the tongue, you see it on both sides. It's pretty rare, except in the case of like a sore or something that's on the tongue. But a lot of times, like if there's scalloped edges, it's on both sides, or if there's a lot of redness, it's on both sides. So again, I don't really see a contradiction there. I think you can really say that it's this middle part of the body, which is where the liver and the spleen are. And then the stomach and the spleen, which are the main digestive organs, are in the middle. So if we see a coating on the tongue, a lot of times it's right in the middle. Sometimes we see it in the back. If we see it all the way in the back, that's usually the intestines. So again, the coating usually signifies some type of accumulation in the body. Again, we don't have enough time to go into all the differentiations of everything, but generally speaking, if you see a thick coating somewhere on the tongue, you can look at your handy map now and be like, oh, maybe things aren't moving so great and digestively, and maybe it's specifically in the intestines.
So you find the back to be more related to the intestines than the kidney?
Than the kidney?
Yeah.
No, but more in the middle, and if there's a coating, it's usually in with the more in the center. So that's more the intestines. So then this Chinese medicine chart shows kidneys and doesn't even mention, this map is not, there's actually better maps of the TCM tongue, because usually the intestines are included back there too. So, But it could be kidney or bladder, but usually if there's a coating, then it is usually the intestines. But then you can ask, and then try to find out more information from the patient at that point.
So
But a simple rule of thumb, if you forget all of these, you can just remember that the front part of the tongue relates to the upper part of the body. Basically, the heart and the lungs. The whole middle section is all of these organs in the middle, the spleen, stomach, liver, gallbladder, spleen, and then the lower part is, all the way in the back is the lower part of the body. So there's our tongue map. We won't be looking at tongues tonight, but
the candida, say you got candida in the intestine area. Is that because there's not enough movement?
It could be not enough movement, or it's just an accumulation of something else, like of yeast, that's present in the lower part of the body.
Okay.
So that's an accumulation. Yeah, you want to move that, clear that, dispel that. So, all right. So let's get specifically into the tastes now. I'm going to erase this now. It's okay. I did want to just say sometimes we can have immediate reactions to taste, and sometimes we have the reactions to taste happen over long term. So, for instance, the pungent taste, which we'll taste tonight, we'll taste all of them, but it typically immediately makes the heart beat a little bit faster and gets the stomach growling. And then sour tends to create bronchial secretions. So those are like immediate effects. Whereas with long-term use, sweet, like I mentioned earlier, can produce heaviness or sluggishness feeling. It can lead to underactive thyroid, having too much sweet, and weight gain. Too much sour can lead to pulmonary congestion. So like I mentioned, and temporarily it can secrete, have secretions from the bronchi temporarily, but if you're using it all the time, then you could really build up congestion, literally, in the lungs. Too much salty over time can definitely weaken the kidneys and cause water retention. The pungent flavor can increase circulation through the heart, which can be good, but it can also, you may not necessarily want to do that. It can increase metabolism, make you really hungry, and it also, because it's typically pretty spicy, it can burn the stomach and lead to ulcers and gastritis. So you need to be careful with that. The bitter flavor, too much bitter, can weaken the pancreas and the spleen. And too much astringency can cause constipation. So that astringent holding things in. All right, let's go on to our next chart here.
The sour does what to the bronchioli?
Sour, it secretes, makes secretions in the lungs. Yeah, the bronchioli.
And what did you say about pungent? Sorry.
About which one?
Pungent.
What it does over long term, that can burn the stomach. It can increase metabolism, make you really hungry. Yeah. So let's hand out these. This one is going to be kind of guiding us as we go through all the tastes.
I don't get bitter either. Sorry.
What did you say?
Bitter? I don't get bitter
Bitter.
either.
What did you
Oh,
say?
it can weaken the spleen and the pancreas. Here you go. So on this chart, as we go through, but I just wanted to point out the third column on this chart says property. And so the first three are building, and the last three are reducing. So in general, maybe you've heard these words anabolism and catabolism. So basically the word anabolism is used in physiology to talk about any process where we're creating something in the body, or it's building. We're building tissue, we're building energy, we're repairing, growing, creating new cells. So all of that falls within this building, or it's also considered anabolic. And then the opposite of that is catabolic. This is the destructive phase, which is also equally necessary stage, where things are broken down, where larger molecules break down into smaller ones. So that would be this reducing. So, all right, so let's start with a sweet flavor. Should we start with a sweet or end with a sweet?
Start so that we won't be tired.
Start with the sweet? Okay. All right, so let's...
It's water element, right? Let's first day of spring, right? So it's changed from water to... Winter is water, right?
Winter is water, yeah, and then Chinese medicine, wood is spring.
It is.
So, but anyway, you're right. That's what we are celebrating. Okay. All right. So everyone, please take one if you'd like. These are dates. You can pass that tray around.
Does anything have cinnamon?
No, it's not cinnamon. It's just dates that
You
are.
call it reducing, right?
No.
You want to grab this?
Sorry?
Reducing.
Can you take this?
This is building.
Thank you.
But the word you used was reducing.
Oh, reducing. Yeah. This on this chart you'll see that property column.
Blue is spring?
You also call it
Winter, spring.
catabolic?
Or catabolic. Yeah.
Winter's water.
Okay. So the sweet flavor. Again, we mentioned it's earth and water in the elements. Its nature is to be heavy, cooling, and oily.
What's heavy?
This is on the chart here? Or?
This is sweet. So we're starting with sweet here.
Yes, it's on the
It's on the chart?
Some of these things, no, what I'm saying now is not on the chart. I mean, some of it might be, but I have slightly different notes I'm giving to you now. So this sweet is strongly present in foods, as you all know, like in sugar, honey, dates, maple syrup, licorice, and it's more mildly so in foods like milk, rice, and wheat. Those are still considered sweet foods, but they're more mild. And in general, sweet is appealing to our taste buds. So then I'm going to divide these effects into effects on the body and effects on the mind. So you can be contemplating, how are you feeling as you eat this sweet food? How does it make your body feel? How is it making your mind feel?
Different.
So generally speaking, the sweet flavor enhances the vital essence of life. So it's definitely building. It's the most building food. If someone's like really has just recovered from a sickness, very emaciated, sweet, we want to be careful, of course, to not do tons and tons of sweet, but healthy sweet foods, even like a lot of root vegetables are considered sweet, carrots and beets. But these are going to help build back energy and strength.
Most fruit is...
What's that?
Like strawberries would be...
No. I mean, they have a sweet aspect to them, but they're more sour, actually. They have that, like, little...
What's a good example of a fruit that would be considered like a go-to sweet fruit?
Mango,
Banana.
banana, pear. So let's see here. It brings strength and longevity, improves complexion. It promotes healthy hair and skin and a sweet voice. It relieves thirst and burning, so it's very soothing. Like if you have ulcers or something, you know, having a little bit of honey in your tea is probably a good idea rather than just having straight green tea or acid reflux. Anytime where things are a little inflamed, you want to be soothing. A little honey is good. Let's see. Can bring stability. So someone who's like really tends to be really like out in the clouds maybe, like really airy, really, you know, spacious. This is very earthy, you know, so this is very grounding of a taste. So it can bring a settling and grounding.
So sweet brings down an airy person.
Mm-hmm.
So
Anchors an airy person.
The opposite of what you would, yeah.
Or the area quality sound here more?
Yeah, it is.
I don't know where to write everything.
Let's see here. So too much sweet, though. So those were kind of the good things about it. If you have too much sweet, it can lead to and be associated with disorders like getting colds and coughs, congestion. It can suppress like too much appetite or loss of appetite because of that heaviness, laziness, weight gain, tumors, edema. It can lead to a sense of needing more sleep and sluggishness. And Definitely, if you use too much, it diminishes the immune system. So, want to be careful with having too much sweet, especially the really extreme sweets like, anything processed sweets or just like straight sugar, something like that. But sweet is the media that bacteria and fungi and parasites like to grow in. So that's why it suppresses the immune system to have too much. Also, too much sweet makes the blood thick and can lead to high cholesterol. So those are pros and cons. And then in terms of the mind, it enhances love and compassion. It kind of brings up this natural affinity for joy and happiness. But in excess, it can lead to attachment, greed, addiction, wanting to possess. So we always talk about things in these terms, that there can be, moderate expressions of things, and that's healthy and natural and good. All like with all the emotions, it's true. Anger, it's not like it's good or bad, or sweet is not good or bad, but it's when something becomes excessive over a long period of time that it can become problematic. So definitely true of all tastes. So that's the sweet taste. Any questions? Everybody enjoying the sweet?
I think it's interesting.
I'm seeing some more smiles, some like rosiness on cheeks coming up.
Some of what you were saying of the positive actions seemed like counterintuitive, like really? But I think it's because most of us have like too much sweet.
Yeah.
So more when you were talking about
the negative side.
Negative, that's what I think of sweet as.
Yeah.
So it's good to be reminded that,
there's good points too, yeah.
It seems like it's often, that people space around it, actually.
Spacey? Yeah. I think that's too much. They're having too much then. And they're probably having more refined, like candy or cake or something like that creates that effect. But if you just have like these more mild, like a little bit of honey in your tea, I mean, this is one of sweet and salty are the most extreme tastes of all of the tastes. So like a little bit goes a long way, and then a little too much can be too much.
What's the powdered stuff on the dates?
It's like flour, right? Oat flour. I think it's just to keep them from sticking together so much.
It seems like if you're doing like way too much, not enough wood, and just not like super amount of metal, because they're across from each other on the chart.
Mm-hmm.
They can throw the balance off real easy.
Oh yeah.
They have to be in balance.
Yeah.
With how they relate. What's across from what and stuff.
For sure.
And
Yeah, he's just talking about the elements. Yeah, we can't.
I'm sorry, next time
Talk
can you
about
tell
that.
me if you have anything, because I'm gluten intolerant and I didn't know that had gluten.
Oh, is that gluten?
Oats, yeah.
Oat flour?
Yes,
You need water?
I should get some water.
Oh,
Was that
sorry.
hot water or cold water?
That's hot water. Do you want some hot
Yeah,
water?
I'll have some hot water.
Okay.
Drown it.
Thank you. Sorry about
No,
that.
it's okay, but I didn't think about that. You see, it's a hidden thing,
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, I used to have the same
gluten's-
problem. I used to have like
I think that's
gluten.
tea, actually.
You can
Oh,
overcome
it's
these
tea,
things.
thank you.
It'll probably be good.
Oh,
Thank you
did
very
you
much.
put dandelion in there? No? It should just be water. There's like a color to it.
Oh, really? It's probably a coffee.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it is, isn't it?
Sorry.
Yeah. Kim, did you just have plain water, Kim? So I just get some more?
Yeah, okay.
They have water.
Thank you.
I think she'll get you some.
No, I'm not gonna go like.
All right, so that's all I had for the sweet. Can we move on?
Yep.
All right, let's go on to sour.
You gotta be careful about love.
All right, this next one here. I think it's probably
I think
good.
salty things, right?
Salting it, do you want to?
Well, we can do, yeah, we can do it in the order on that chart,
Okay,
that's fine.
okay.
Let's do that. So we'll do salty. I thought maybe we should hand out some napkins at this point, actually. Well, that'll probably be handy.
Oh, yeah, I could use another one. I always take too many. You want some of the cat? Thank you. You're so sweet.
Actually, why don't we hand out plates?
What is the over here? Thanks, Kim.
And then we'll take a plate and a fork as well.
No, it's good. This is pretty good. Yeah.
So for salty tonight, we're going to taste seaweed. And I'm just going to look at, because I know this has sesame oil and salt
Yeah.
and seaweed, of course.
Fine.
So,
Are you looking to soy as well?
No, thank you. No.
I used to
please just
Yeah,
take
both.
one.
No, I
Please just take one, or
I can eat whatever I want now.
maybe just one.
Yeah, the
I mean,
weed.
do people do it though? Doesn't that go together?
Yeah, and
I think,
It's really hard
I
to
don't like,
go out and
hate
eat
to
to
say
get
I don't like soy. I used to make one Sony, but now this is
That's
honestly,
the weird,
so
yeah.
I agree, I think. It doesn't stick.
You got a short one?
What?
balancing all the meridians and the elements, it's flowing like
Oh, really?
that's how I became because like even the elements balance. That's why
How do we balance it?
there's some people on college that do like what she does and other things too.
Oh, okay.
We do it.
Get rid of my.
Wait till everybody has their treat.
Yeah.
Question,
It's good.
on the sheet you have dosha and pitta and vata.
Yeah, I really debated about this. It's just such a big topic. Those are the constitution. Yeah, say what they are. Those are the constitutional types in Ayurvedic medicine. So they really put.
Just for that,
Yes. So generally, the pitta is the more fiery. It's associated with the fire element. Vata. So we're talking about this dosha category on our chart here. She was inquiring about that. So these are the constitutions in Ayurvedic medicine. So pitta is associated more with fiery, vata is more with air, and kapha more with water. But I mean, there's just really so much to say about all those, and to say, oh, which one am I? I mean, it's really complex.
It's forever changing throughout life too. Like you're not necessarily.
Well,
like,
they say you do have a
like blood type.
constitutional dosha that you're born with from your parents, and then what changes is there's prakriti and vikriti. The prakriti is your constitution. The vikriti is your temporary constitution it's an imbalance, and you want to get back to your prakriti. So that's what your dosha is. And a lot of times people are more than one. They're like primarily one and secondarily one. So
kapha is water?
hmm
So
in
this
terms of the elements,
Pitta is fire, Vata is air, and what was the other?
kapha is water.
Okay, okay.
All right. So salty. Salty again is a combination of water and fire. It's heating, heavy, oily, and hydrophilic. Examples, I mean, there's actually not a ton of examples, but table salt, sea salt, rock salt, seaweed, tamari, those are all the most common examples.
Miso is just salty because they add salt to it. It's not actually like that, right?
Yeah, it's not, because it's just like barley, fermented.
But with salt.
Yeah, but it's fermented with the salt. They use a lot of
that's part
salt
the
to make it. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that makes it a little more.
Yeah, just like sauerkraut, they use.
It has.
Your body can process it probably a lot easier when it's made with fermented, so it's
Yeah. Yeah, that's what they say.
So the only salty thing is salt.
Really? Yeah. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Okay, so due to its water element, it's laxative, and due to the fire in it, it's antispasmodic. It's anabolic, so it's building. Just a little bit of salt really enhances the flavor of food, but more than a little bit totally nullifies the other tastes. It's so strong, so similar to sweet. It's really strong. Salty, maybe you're noticing this right now, stimulates salivation. It aids digestion. It can help with the absorption and assimilation of foods and help eliminate waste. It's anti-flatulent. It removes gases from the colon. And in moderation, it promotes growth and gives energy and maintains electrolyte balance. A little bit can equalize blood pressure. And particularly for people who sweat a lot, they typically need a little bit more in their diet because they're losing sodium that way. But too much salt can cause water retention, again thickening in the blood, thickening of the arteries and all the vessels, leading to hypertension. It can lead to sensations of heat, ulcers, bleeding disorders, hyperacidity, wrinkles.
Hyperacidity.
Wrinkles on the skin. And typically it worsens skin conditions. It can cause hair loss and can induce vomiting. So this isn't like excess salt, too much salt.
So you think like making your food like vegetable, like beans and rice diet, you weren't adding salt? Do you think you still get enough salt? Because it seems like
She said something.
I don't add salt to anything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
You may not be getting enough.
but somebody's telling me that you shouldn't do a lot of salt at the same time.
Well, you shouldn't do a lot, but again, it's just like a tiny bit, So some foods have salt in them, but if you're not getting any, then you probably are low in it.
Right.
Yeah.
It was
Put some seaweed in your soup.
It was a blood thing, like according to this guy's trying to tell me, like, according to my blood type, I was doing too much salt, and I was like, okay, definitely is salt. And he's like, oh, even that, like, you really shouldn't do it. And I wasn't doing it right.
Yeah.
Again, when he said that, so I thought it was weird.
Yeah.
Not sure. But, I mean, do you think you just get enough from just food alone if you added no salt to your diet?
Not unless it's not naturally salty food. Like seaweed, if you have seaweed in there. Yeah, you're probably not getting it. Or salted butter or something.
That's how I get salt, actually, seaweed.
Yeah, that's great. That's a really great source.
That's the only way that I get.
Yeah.
Is there other foods that have a lot of salt besides seaweed?
No, I mean, you really just like salted butter, like I mentioned that, or
Yeah, it's added salt.
What about celery and things like that? Or is that
celery,
potassium
no.
rather than
Yeah,
sodium?
potassium.
Or just wheat.
All right, so let's keep moving on. So salt in the mind, so we talked about the body there. The mind, it enhances the spirit and promotes confidence and courage, interest. Like if you think about eating a bag of chips or something, you kind of get like excited.
Sea chips back here.
And so, like, never want to put down a bag of chips. I mean, it's like, they can be that taste can be very addicting. So similar to the sweet.
So do you have a bag
I
of
chips
chips
more of those
before you
seaweed
have
things
a
right now.
session?
I have chips sometimes, definitely. I definitely enjoy chips sometimes. But if you eat a totally salt-free diet, you'll typically feel more dull or depressed and not like you don't have enough creativity. It creates that interest, inquiring mind, kind of sparks that probing mind. It improves the flavor of our relationships. So, but again, in excess, it can create addiction, temptation, greed, attachment, all the same things actually as sweet. So that's sweet and salty. Let's move on to sour, so we have enough time for everything. Let's pass around. This is an obvious one, but we're doing lemons for sour because it's such a good example. Please take one or two and pass around.
How does one know?
So if it's too much, you just know your own body?
Well,
How do you know what excess is?
you don't need much of salt,
Well, okay,
like a pinch.
for the whole day?
Well, no, I'm sure. I don't know offhand what the dose is,
Once again,
and I'm sure that's different. Yeah.
It was
So
very
notice with
seasoned.
this sour, what happens right as you first take it? What happens to your mind? What happens to your senses?
Sparkles.
Okay, let's try to hold questions and comments, please, just since we only have a little bit longer to cover the rest of the class. So, okay, so the sour taste is also, oops, I skipped that one. There we go. It's liquid, light, and heating, which we mentioned that earlier, which was the difference between astringency and sour. So sour is typically heating, light, liquid. It stimulates metabolism. So this is found in foods like sour cream, yogurt, vinegar, kiwis, citrus fruits like lemon and grapefruit, green grapes, and a lot of fermented foods are considered sour. Even just kiwis, I know, like ever since I was little, like even just the thought of a kiwi makes my mouth water. So in the body, that's what happens. It really creates increases salivary secretions. The moment you put sour on your tongue, your senses become sharper, and you close your eyes. I don't know if you all noticed you do that, but so because the senses get so sharp, it's almost too much that we have to close our eyes because we have to close it off. It's so intense, even just for that second. It immediately, for a second, makes the eyes and ears and teeth sensitive. Increases salivary secretions, like I mentioned, stimulates appetite, and it enhances the secretion of digestive enzymes. A little bit is anti-flatulent and antispasmodic. It's refreshing and energizing to the body. It nourishes the heart and enlivens the mind. A small amount of apple cider vinegar, which you may have heard about this, can help balance cholesterol and eliminate congestion in the liver. In large amounts, though, it can dry the membranes and create congestion. For example, a small amount of vitamin C, which is sour in nature, twice a day, like 500 milligrams of vitamin C twice a day will help reduce congestion. But if you go into these really high amounts of vitamin C, like to, 3, 5, 10 grams of vitamin C, that can worsen congestion. And also, so then in excess, and I've experienced this, too much lemon, or sour in general, can cause sensitive teeth, can cause excess thirst, hyperacidity, heartburn, acid indigestion, ulcers. In large amounts, it becomes toxic to the blood and can cause skin conditions or worsen skin conditions like dermatitis, acne, any kind of rash or eczema, psoriasis. And it can cause burning really anywhere in the body because it does increase the acidic pH of the blood.
What did you say about the apple cider vinegar for the liver?
Yeah, it removes congestion. It clears congestion. Just like a teaspoon.
It was apple cider vinegar and honey, okay.
Honey?
No, and vitamin C.
Yeah, vitamin C. Apple cider vinegar
But a
and
small amount of
C.
vitamin C can relieve congestion, but a large amount can create it.
Let me repeat that. Apple cider vinegar and vitamin C.
Yeah, we didn't
will
mention
help
honey.
clear the...
Well, apple cider vinegar helps clear the liver of congestion.
Okay.
Yeah, and vitamin C, I was meaning congestion more like in the lungs and sinuses, and that people will often take vitamin C when they have congestion in those areas.
So sour is air in both TCM and Ayurveda? It's wood and TCM.
It's wood and TCM, yeah.
That's really good to know.
Sorry, I didn't mean to open up the question.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you. Yeah, we're going to run out of time if we do too many. So let's see. So that's the body. So with the mind, the sour flavor brings comprehension, recognition, discrimination. So you think about that, like what it's doing with your senses. It's enabling you to kind of sort things out and figure out, mentally. It creates sharpness, it increases attention span, makes the mind more alert. But in excess, it can induce like too much judgment or criticism, or jealousy, even hatred. It can make the mind agitated and hyperactive. So discriminating that it becomes critical. Fascinating. So that is the sour flavor. Let's move on to pungent. So for pungent tonight, we have radish, daikon radish. Oh, we have two. So this is a cooling pungent. This is a discrimination that's definitely made a lot in Chinese medicine, the cooling pungents and the warming pungents. So this is a cooling pungent, the radish, and then a warming pungent is a ginger. So.
Got a little bit of sweet on that too, then.
Yes, this does have a little sugar on it.
I can.
Okay. And it'll help you digest that gluten.
Okay.
Yeah. Not a fan? You like the radish though, huh? Oh, interesting.
What does that mean?
I don't know. I just mean you have heat and you like the cooling.
Yeah, I have a lot of heat. No, I don't. I don't like cream. Too much cream.
Thank you. Okay, so the pungent flavor is a combination of the fire and the air element. It's more light, drying, and either heating or cooling. So depending. So examples of this are like cayenne pepper, chili pepper, black pepper, mustard, ginger. Those are all warming.
What about clove?
Yeah, clove is definitely a warming one. Garlic and onion.
Oh, I like that.
Radish. Gosh, radish is the only cooling one I wrote in my list here. That's funny. I know that the spice marjoram falls into that category. It's a cooling, pungent.
Cardamom as well?
Marjoram.
But what about cardamom?
Oh, cardamom is warming.
Pungent then?
Yeah. It's kind of more has a sweetness to it, but it also has a little bite. Yeah, I think it would be put in that category too. In pungent.
Oh.
So generally, this taste improves digestion in small amounts. It cleans the mouth, clears the sinuses by stimulating nasal secretion. So like if you think about having hot peppers or garlic and onion, you're like usually your nose starts to run, so it can clear it out. It aids in circulation. It can break up blood clots, removes fats, and helps in the elimination of wastes. Most of the herbs and foods that are in the pungent category are blood thinners, antispasmodic, and antiparasitic. Overuse of them can kill sperm and eggs and cause sexual debility. It can induce burning, choking sensation, hiccups, fatigue and thirst, skin conditions. In certain constitutions, it can lead to diarrhea, more that pitta, the fire type of constitution. It can lead to diarrhea and heartburn and nausea. In others, like in the vata category, it can lead to tremors, giddiness, insomnia. So like a vata is considered an air constitution. So then if you have this really moving, pungent food that's also like really airy and drying, it can lead to that the mind being so active that you can't sleep. It can create inflammation and irritation, and it can even be carcinogenic. So like people who are worried about that or have a history of cancer, I would recommend they stay away from too much, particularly hot, pungent foods. Like too much garlic and onions and peppers and stuff like that. Yeah, it can.
Tumor and cancer, stay away from the hot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe that's one.
So, and then with the mind, the pungent flavor brings enthusiasm and vigor. I don't know if you felt that with the spiciness of it. Just kind of like wakes things up. It removes obstructions and brings clarity, perception. It's sharp and penetrating, so it helps the mind to probe into things, investigate things, explore, and also to focus. But too much can make the mind like really like scattered and irritable. Can incite anger, especially the heat type of pungency, aggression, competition. So that's pungent.
Pungent is a better word for spicy?
Yeah, you could say spicy, and in Chinese medicine they say acrid, but that's all the same category.
Is turmeric pungent?
Turmeric? It's more bitter.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going on to bitter next, I think.
So it seems like a lot of these spices. Sorry, get a whole thing. Question.
Yeah, maybe at the end. That's okay. All right, so let's do bitter next. So for bitter, we're going to have a little tea. We have dandelion tea here. You know what? I was thinking maybe we should have brewed it in here so we don't all have to have a tea bag, because these are tiny little cups. Or we could just have a full cup. Want to just do that? Have a full cup of dandelion tea?
Right.
All right, so maybe, let's see. Could someone assist me? Do you mind doing it?
Yeah, just make up the bunch.
Yeah, just give everybody a cup of tea. Does everybody want one? So, 1, 2.
So that's hot water now.
This is hot water and pure dandelion root tea. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You don't want it?
Oh, do.
You do. You don't want it. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Maybe 11. I'll have one too.
So astringent, diuretic would be the same thing as astringent? I know dandelion's like diuretic. Would all diuretics be astringent?
No. Diuretic causes you to lose fluid. Astringent hold fluid.
But dandelion's still refilling then, even though you lose
Well, dandelion's bitter, so we're in bitter.
fluid. Oh, sure.
This is the bitter
That makes
category.
more sense. I was
Yeah.
confused by that.
Yeah.
Wait, chili, yes, hot chili.
All right, so I'm going to just keep talking as we're passing these out so we have time. So bitter is the air in the ether. It's said to improve all the other tastes. You put a little bitter. It's drying, it's light, and it's cooling. This is the most lacking flavor or taste in the American diet. Think examples are turmeric, dandelion root, which we're having here, fenugreek, sandalwood, bitter melon, neem, and then coffee. That's the only one that we have in excess. So those are all bitter. So in the body, the bitter flavor is antitoxic. It kills germs. It's anti-inflammatory. Reduces fever. Basically, you can think of a lot of the bitter herbs are, I think they said something like 70% of the herbs, medicinal herbs, are bitter. 70%. So this is a very important flavor and taste because of its ability to kill toxins. In fact, it's antibacterial and antiviral. It can be laxative if you have a lot of bitter food, like dandelion tea. If you were to have like 3 or 4 cups of dandelion tea, you probably it would move the stool. But it's clearing. It helps to clear things out of the body. It relieves burning. A little bit can relieve intestinal gas. You can look at my notes later, and since you're not getting. Okay. Let's see. It's drying, so it can reduce fat in the body. So people will often use bitter melon is actually a pretty popularized herb right now for weight loss. But too much of it can deplete the tissues, and it can lead to extreme dryness because it's so clearing. So you can find, you wouldn't want to give too much bitter to someone who's already really dry. It can lead to emaciation and bone loss and weariness. So because it has this directly reducing effect on the body, you just want to be careful of reducing too much. But many Americans don't need to worry about that. Most of us need to do more of that. But you can definitely overdo it. Sometimes people who have more extreme diets that are only having raw vegetables and that's it, they might be getting too much bitter and losing too much and not creating enough. So if you notice in that property, this is reducing. It's catabolic with bitter flavor.
So you relate that to vegetables mostly?
Yeah, a lot of the green leafy vegetables are considered bitter. Yeah, so they're so good. And, a lot of it has to do with how we prepare food, too. So, we don't have time to go into that tonight, but, whether we're frying it, boiling it, steaming it, so sometimes just cooking a little bit can reduce the extremity of that, of the bitterness. Or putting a little bit of oil can sweeten it, so things like that, you can change it. So too much, again, can also inhibit sexual energy. The bitter flavor kills worms in the body, and sperm is considered a micro-worm. That's what they talk about it as. So it can promote celibacy. So if someone's actually wanting to intentionally be celibate, bitter would probably be a good flavor,
So it would be anti-candida too, since it's anti-worm?
Yeah, pau d'arco, which is a very famous herb for candida, is definitely a bitter herb. So in the mind, the bitter flavor makes the mind calm. and celibate. So we just use that word, celibate. It can cause you to kind of quiet and withdraw from temptation, make the mind a little more introverted, become more self-aware, more self-conscious. Can help you if you're wanting to be more introspective, kind of go from the outer world more into the inner world. The bitter flavor can help with that. But again, just like anything, too much can lead to being cynical, boring. It can lead to aversion, and like so that inward movement like can make you almost cut off or separated, isolated, and lonely. So that's bitter. Probably should have done this in another order actually, because I'm realizing our last one, astringent, is also a liquid. It's pomegranate juice, which is such a treat. This is really a treat. But if that's okay, we'll just mix our liquids here. You can, have a little bit. So, yeah, thank you. Okay, so moving on to our last taste is astringent. And we're going to do pomegranate juice for this. And this is the pure pomegranate juice. Not the, you can get a lot of them out there mixed with blueberry or something. And you don't really taste the pomegranate too much. So this one is 100% pomegranate. So this astringent taste is cooling and drying. So remember that this is in opposition to that sour, which is more warming and moistening. So when you have this, you'll notice that it's kind of like it dries your mouth when you taste this pomegranate juice. So drying, and it's also heavy in nature. It creates a dry, choking sensation in the mouth. Examples of astringent are unripe banana, pomegranate, chickpeas, yellow split peas, okra, alfalfa sprouts, and a lot of raw vegetables also fall into this category.
Like what?
Really most raw vegetables.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
More than bitter?
Both. Most raw vegetables are both bitter and astringent. Yeah. So in the body, the astringent taste improves absorption. So again, like if you think about astringing, that's soaking something up. So that astringent, it's improving the absorption of things. It creates binding of the stool. Whenever someone has diarrhea or dysentery, they can try to eat unripe banana, and that usually will help. It's a good quick food you can have for that. And you can also cook the unripe banana a little bit to make it a little more digestible, because it's if it's pretty hard. So it's anti-inflammatory and decongestant, with an astringent flavor. It heals ulcers and can help scrape fat from the vessels. That's definitely something they say about pomegranate juice, that it clears fat from the vessels.
What vessels?
Just all the vessels in the circulatory system, but also, the heart. It stops bleeding. So again, astringing, stops bleeding, promotes clotting, and constricts the blood vessels. It absorbs water and causes dryness and difficult speech. So, can you feel that in your mouth when you drink that pomegranate?
It helps with this.
No, it causes that because of that drying sensation in the throat. So too much astringency can create spasms or griping in the intestines. It can lead to constipation. So if you have too much of it, so it can relieve diarrhea, but it can also create constipation. In extreme cases, it can lead to clotting where you don't want there to be clotting. It can lead to choking, distension in the abdomen. Spasms, convulsions, decreased sex drive. Again, these last three are all reducing. So remember, we're talking about breaking things down. So in the mind, the astringent flavor is supportive and grounding because it has the earth element there. It also brings things together. It kind of has a collecting and organizing effect on the mind. Puts things in their right place. But too much can be disorganizing. It can just kind of it's so much doing that it scatters things. And it can create insomnia, it can create anxiety, nervousness, harshness, rigidity. So that's too much astringency. Okay. that's all 6 tastes. Let's see, there's... All right, just a couple just notes in terms of balance, creating balance with all the tastes. In the diet of a healthy person, we want to have some of all the flavors. And again, like I mentioned right in the very beginning, depending on your constitution, you may want more or less of certain flavors. But generally, it's good to have a little bit of everything in your diet. And you could generally say that the sweet flavor could predominate because it's associated with the digestive organs and just general nourishment and building strength in the body. So they say that sweet can predominate, but it's very important to remember this is not talking about like our ordinary sweet foods. It's things like the root vegetables and a little bit of honey and sweetening things just on the side, or like rice and wheat and milk. All those things, they fall into that sweet category. So as long as you can eat those foods, they're good. Like most grains, legumes, nuts and seeds and fruit all have a sweet flavor. So to try to have those types of foods predominate. Let's see. Just making sure I'm not missing anything here. I think I'll just mention I have 9 little eating habits that are good to remember. Wanting to avoid 1, overeating. Eating too soon after you already had a meal. These are somewhat
4
common
hours,
sense.
right? 4 hours.
Well, they say a full digestive process, the complete process, is 6 to 8 hours. But, it's really like 2 to 4 hours that you won't feel it so much in the stomach anymore, It should be gone by that point from the stomach. Too much water.
Fruits
So when you're
digest in
eating-
30 minutes.
Fruit is actually supposed to be had separate
By
from other
itself.
foods, yeah. I actually don't. Oh no, I do have that in the list,
And
yeah.
proteins can take
A long time.
a long time.
Yeah, starches are right away. Yeah.
So when was
Um,
overeating?
So one was overeating, eating too soon after a meal. The next one was too much water or no water during a meal.
You should have
Then,
water.
yeah, a little bit of water, but not too much.
Just did a wash away.
And drinking very cold water is generally not recommended for anybody. If you run really hot, then it's maybe okay to have a little bit of cool water, but you don't want to have icy water.
Yeah.
In Chinese medicine, actually, they say never to have cold water. But in Ayurvedic medicine, they talk about having a little bit of cool water if you're hot, really hot. So, eating when you're constipated is not a really good idea. Things aren't moving yet, so you gotta slow it down. Eating at the wrong time of day, which basically means eating too early or too late in the day. Drinking fruit juice or eating fruit with a meal, which we mentioned. Eating when you're not hungry. And emotional eating. So those are the 9 improper eating habits. Just thought to mention those as part of the class.
What was the second to last one?
The second to last one was eating when you're not hungry.
What was that?
Emotional eating. So it's 7 o'clock. Just want you all to know that we were scheduled for 5:30 to 7. And I'm happy to take you through a quick tour in the store to point out the foods that we had tonight. Are people open to staying for a little bit longer and you're doing that? Or yeah? Okay, great. So then if you'd like to
Can I
stay.
see those 9 notes?
Oh, sure.
Must have
9 notes.
juice.
And I'll just mention here, if you are going to leave, I have brochures about my practice. I have three locations where I work. I have an office here in Ithaca, and then I have an office in Binghamton, and an office in Bainbridge. So I'm kind of moving around a lot. But anyway, this is a little bit of information about my practice and also just Chinese medicine in general, just a very brief cards and things. And there's also an evaluation form if you wanted to fill that out. You could just leave it on your chair, and I can pick those up at the end. And I think that's it. If there are any short questions, I'm happy to answer them right now.
We only got
We
8.
only got 8
I
on this
think that
side.
We only got a list
the
of
one
8.
I missed was
Yeah.
too much water or no water is one, and then very chilled water is a separate one.
No chilled water? Okay.
Very chilled water, don't drink
Not
very
nice
chilled water.
Oh,
It's the
that's
separate one.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Okay.
Is that
gotcha.
right? So avoid overeating too soon.
You want to take a look at that?
Yeah, that's
All right.
better. Thank you.
There's a little garbage in the back of the room there.
Yes.
Do you have an excerpt or that I could
Which
take?
one? This one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just have one, that's okay, you can have it.
You sure?
Yep. Yeah, that's funny, I don't have any more than that, but.
What was the topic of this?
It's called Relish the Taste, the 6 flavors.
What was it? Ayurvedic? What was the author?
Oh yeah, I'll write that on the board. This is a really, if you're interested in Ayurvedic medicine, a lot of the class tonight came from this book called The Fundamentals of Ayurveda.
Okay.
And that's by Dr. Vasant Lad.
Yeah.
Have you used the book of Paul Pitchford?
I hear my name. Okay, Dr. Vasant Lad, L.A.D.
LA.
Does he teach in California?
He teaches in New Mexico, Albuquerque.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's one of the more famous Ayurvedic doctors in the West.
I didn't even know that. I wish I knew that when I was up there.
Yeah.
So in China, they had you drink tea before they looked at your tongue. Is there a certain kind of tea that would be?
Oh, that I didn't have that happen. They wouldn't. No, you'd
I
actually.
did.
It's best to look at the tongue, like when you haven't had any food or drink or anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wondered if it was some sort of dyeing thing that, you know, color dyeing or something. that
No,
would make
yeah,
it-
it's actually better to not to have anything, so you can see the true. And same when you read the pulse. It's best. Ideally, actually, they say to read the pulse at between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m.
Oh, God.
Which I
Who's
mean,
up
Yeah.
who does that really?
Right.
I do.
But-
I love doing practice at the time. It's the best time to do anything.
Yeah, it's a good time, but typically, it's best if you haven't had like a lot to eat, or you know.
High five with that.
So anyway, to get a true reading, although I can almost always feel when someone has just had a meal. I mean, it shows in the pulse, so then you can learn to just distinguish that and know that that's what it is.